back. A lot of people out there are like, Schmitto, did you ever leave? You're just always and you've got Olivia with you right now too. Does Liv ever? Does she ever sleep? Does she ever leave the screen? And in just a second, you're going to see I'm bringing another person on here who I don't know that you guys have ever met. No. I'm super excited to see this convo and to see where we go with this. So 3, 2.
Hey, can you guys hear me on their end?
I am so excited. You guys, I am pumped for this. And in just a second, I'll turn it over to you guys so you guys can tell the world who you are and all of that fun stuff. We're not going to dominate social media too long here. We're not going to be taking up a lot of time. But for those people that are checking this out, no, this is not a podcast. No, this is not a daily drop-in. No, this is not just a Schmitto rant. This is just a couple of people that for some crazy reason in the middle of summer want to talk about assessment. What? I know. We just, anybody that was watching the replay of this is just like, seriously, I'm hitting delete, but I'm going to pause you right now because we're not talking about all that boring, nasty, quantitative statistical analysis stuff. I mean, we might a little bit, but that's not the focus of this. I can tell you right now, I do not have a degree in math. My only statistics class was when I was going to get my doctorate, and I hated that course. I've been in education for 21 years. I'm not necessarily a data guy when we start talking data, but I mean, at least the way it's been perverted, the way that we've twisted that word of recently. But I do love getting to know kids. I love learning about what kids love. And that's going to be part of our conversation today. So on that note, before I introduce you guys, I'm going to let you jump in. Liv, you were here first. So ladies first. Liv, tell the world who you are as if they don't know who you are.
Well, I'm Liv. My friends call me Liv. And I am moving to a grade 5 teacher and a new head teacher at my new school. I previously, most of my experience is teaching grade 2-3. I've also served as on our staff development team in learning technologies for 6 years. So I'm just kind of back into the classroom for the last 2. And education has changed, since I've left the classroom. So it's been interesting to kind of get back into it. And I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it.
And as we learned...
I'm also an ambassador for the Teach Better team.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and as we learned this morning, you are Jeff Gargas's favorite Canadian. So yeah. I'm so glad we got you here. That's awesome. That's awesome.
There aren't that many to pick from.
What, there's only like 5 of you or something? No. And some grizzly bears and black bears and some moose, but no. And then we got British Columbia represented here, and then we've got New Mexico represented. Eli, tell the world who you are, man.
Yeah, the 505 chili capital of the world. Yeah. So I'm Elijah Carvajal, for those that don't know who I am. I teach in New Mexico. Born and raised there, and don't really have any plans on leaving anytime soon. But I love it here. Right now, I made the move back to Albuquerque. I was teaching in Aztec, which is kind of up near Durango, Colorado. So I was up there for a while, back in Albuquerque Public Schools, teaching 3rd grade, which is probably my favorite grade to teach. So I taught 3rd and 4th. So yeah, the little kids. Yeah, I like the younger grades. But I love the content because it's one of those, like, it's mind blowing to them, like all the new stuff, but it's all like foundational and like super important. And so like they come in with that, like, like not knowing all this stuff, and by the end their little minds are just blown. And it's cool to see too, like their independence, kind of like them grow in their own independence and stuff like that.
Gain that self-efficacy and know their stuff. And yeah, that's sweet.
That's cool. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, happy to be here.
No, I am excited. So again, let me frame this for people. So you heard who these 2 amazing all-stars are, these rock stars of education. Those of you that are watching right now, you're watching this on my social media feed, so I hope you know who I am. And again, that I don't necessarily live in academia. I don't dive into academic journals and research. I don't read dissertations for leisure. Don't have a degree in math. Was never a math teacher. I was a middle school guy for most of my career, spent some time in elementary, and you heard from both of them. They don't live in like high school statistics and accounting. That's not their world. But for some reason, I threw out this call on social media and said, anybody want to talk assessment or talk about that ugly 4-letter word of data? And the 2 of you said, Sure. Let's go there. Crazy.
not?
Crazy. So I'm just curious. So I'll start off with just a question. Like, why? Why would you be willing to talk data and assessment? I jokingly say data is like that 4-letter word that's scrawled all over staff bathrooms. Nobody in schools wants to talk data, but you do. Why?
You know, Dave, I thought the same thing about you. Actually, when I first saw, I was like, Dave Schmidt was coming out with a book about assessment. I was like, I'm not gonna lie, I was like, okay, cool, like assessment. Like,
someone will read it.
Like, someone will read it. Yeah, someone will read it.
I'll read it.
But then, like, as I started seeing like more, and I was like, I know Dave, like not personally, but I mean, I've seen your stuff and I see you on social media all the time. So I was like, you know what? No, it's probably a really good book. I need to look into that. And actually, it's pointed out like I haven't finished it yet. I'm about a little more than halfway through, but it's been really eye opening for me, and kind of convicting in a lot of ways. So I've really appreciated how you've like taken like all the, I don't know, for lack of a better word, the bad ways of assessing and the bad ways, like the negative ways of interpreting data, and like kind of breaking that apart and then like stripping it down to nothing. Because by exposing all that, it helps expose, our own shortcomings, which assessment isn't something I know a lot about. And so that was another reason, like, you know what, I probably should read this book anyway. This book is for me.
Well, I think, there's a few things I want to comment on that, and then I'll go back to Liv here. But I don't want people to think that this is a book that's just like accusatory and I'm coming out guns a-blazing saying the system is broken, it's all flawed. But
no, not at all.
But I do think that at times we have misused and misapplied assessment and data and made it seem like it's something that's out of reach for a lot of us, because we start throwing a bunch of statistics and we start talking means, median, mode, standard deviation, stanines, percentiles, RIT scores, a bunch of stuff that we as educators look at and say, we don't want to start equating our kids to numbers. So we move ourselves as far away from understanding that as possible. And then we let other people come in and start slapping labels on our kids to tell us what our kids can and can't do. And we're left saying, okay, data is just this nasty evil. It's a label maker for me and my kids. So I'm going to run the opposite direction.
Exactly.
And I don't know that was necessarily the original intent behind all these people. I think people were trying to help us and trying to say, you don't need to worry about it. We'll handle it. But sometimes when we let other people handle our business, the business becomes theirs, not ours. So my goal is to kind of expose some of that, and then just to tell us what is the real intent and how can we truly use assessment at the classroom level, at the school level, so that the big suits that come in and do make those labels for us can go do some other things and take care of some other problems, not us. So Liv, why were you interested in talking data and assessment today?
Well, what grabbed me was just listening to you speak on it, and then you and Caitlin talking about it, and everything you were saying, I was like, yes, I want to jump into the screen and go, I'm with you. And so when you had put out that call, I just thought, this is something that I really believe in too, and everything, like I'm on chapter 5, middle of chapter 5, and I love your analogies. Like, it just makes sense. I'm an analogy person too, and so every time you bring up another one, it's like, yes, that helps me really understand what you're trying to say. And it's very like what Elijah was saying, it's very confirming. And a lot of things that I'm reading, I'm right with you on that. And I think being a primary, like I'm a primary trained teacher, and we didn't really give grades. I mean, I don't know what they do in the States, but we don't give grades. So it was before I was on staff development, it was exceeding expectations, meeting expectations, approaching, or not yet meeting, right? We've changed the language since. So it's more of a continuum of emerging, developing, applying, and extending, but it's still kind of like that 4-point scale, if you want to call it that. And, I want to talk about that too, because, it's a continuum. Like, it's not you are emerging or you are applying. It's you are on a continuum, right? And where you are, you're developing on throughout that. But I think it's, everything you talk about, like strength-based, the reflection that you need, understanding kids, and the assessment and I like your chapter about when you're talking about the three things that determine what matters most, the frequency of the measurement, and focus on the most recent growth. Like everything you're saying just kind of is in line with what I'm thinking, and I just wanted an opportunity to talk shop and talk to somebody who's kind of on the same wavelength and just pick your brain a little bit more.
Well, I think it's interesting that you both come with that elementary mindset, which is awesome, and it's refreshing as well to hear elementary teachers say, no, assessment kind of does fit within our realm. And I've heard from a lot of people in a lot of places that say early L, we don't necessarily use grades. And grades, I'm using that word in the traditional sense of A, B, C, D, E, or F, or whatever. But Liv, even in what you just said, I would argue that you do grade, but it's not necessarily using the letters, if you will. We're still assigning labels and designations to kids, even at early ages. My youngest is going into kindergarten this year. My oldest is going into high school. But my youngest, even when he was in preschool, he had a full printout with probably 50 different skills that the teacher was assessing throughout the year, with getting little check marks to say, how is he developing throughout? And in his mind, that was a report card. In my mind, he was being graded or assessed in his progress. And it fascinates me on a lot of different levels. And we're not necessarily going to talk about this today, but it fascinates me why we're able to do that at early ages with so many developing skills and standards for kids. But yet we often switch and change that out in upper elementary, middle school, and high school, which is a whole nother conversation for another day. So we'll leave that there. But so let me go back to Elijah here. Elijah, being a guy who said you're not really big on assessment, you weren't this assessment expert, and I would say probably today you probably still don't feel like you're this assessment expert, but you love kids. You truly do. I mean, you are a dude that you are out there. You are keeping it real. You don't make excuses for anything, right? You are a straight shooter in life and in all things. That you love kids. Do you feel like assessing kids using data conflicts with that love, or do you feel like it supports it? I mean, do you feel like they're two different worlds? You can be a data assessment guy and still love kids at the same time?
I think you're right. I think that you can, maybe not love data, but appreciate it and still love kids at the same time and use it to the benefit of it. You bring up some good points. It's all about how it's used, and it's about how we interpret that data. You made a comment, and I don't remember the chapter exactly, but you said something like we need, and I'm paraphrasing, but we need to use data to address what kids can do and what they do know instead of just what they don't know and what they can't do. And unfortunately, that is there's that kind of atmosphere sort of hovers around data sometimes and assessments. And so in that sense there, yes, kids just become a number. They just become another statistic. And so I like what you have to say in your book, just about, hey, like kids are human beings. I've always believed, we're not robots programming robots, we're humans teaching humans.
Yeah. And
we have to look at that and say, hey, like this kid can actually do X, Y, and Z. There's some struggles, whatever, we'll address that. But yeah, I do believe that it can be used because when you really truly care about kids, you're going to look at every piece of who they are. And assessment is just, their data is just a small piece of who they are as an individual, but we still have to look at that piece there.
Yeah, for sure. And for those of you that are watching this right now, feel free to throw some comments or questions in there, and these guys can answer it, or I'll try to address it. Again, we're not going to take up way too much of your time, but if you do have some questions, feel free to throw them in there, whether they have anything to do with the book or not. Maybe you just want to know what products Elijah uses on his beard. Feel free to ask. Maybe you want to know what the weather's like over in British Columbia. Feel free to ask. Whatever. It's fair game. I'll put them on the spot today. It's all good. Maybe you want to know what he's actually drinking in his cup. Whatever. Go with it. But the idea of the strength-based approach is something that I preach a lot. In a lot of schools, we do use that deficit mindset, and I understand it. We have to try to look for the gaps. We need to try to look for the holes so that we can try to fill them. But what we often forget is that all learning is truly built on prior learning. And I use the example all the time with babies learning to talk. First, they learn to cry. They realize they can get a response from mama or dad by crying. Then they start to learn a couple of words and they realize, oh, the response is a little bit different. And there's a bigger smile. So that then builds to more vocabulary and more words. We're always building on prior knowledge in all aspects of life. You don't ever learn something brand new without it building upon something that you've already known. And it's important for us as educators to recognize that. It's important for us to recognize what kids do know, what they are familiar with, so that we can build it to something new, to something different. But often with our assessment, we're so keen on just marking things right, wrong. Here's what you don't know. Now I'm going to just try to fill in the gap, as opposed to looking at the assessment saying, okay, where are you and what can I do next? It's so important and it's so powerful.
And on
go ahead,
that
Liv.
note, it's not, I see it not as just a role that the teacher is playing though. It's the student's role as well in their own learning. Right?
Yes.
And so, when I think about our report cards, like I wanted to ask you, what are report cards like in the States? I know, like I'm at an amazing, like I just left an amazing school, and that school has been a leader in talking about assessment and reporting. And our report cards are quite amazing because we have all the, it is in a sense a grade because we have all the subjects, and then we actually have a sliding scale for where they're at in terms of their emerging, developing, applying, and extending. So I can just move that, wherever I feel they're on. And then it's broken up into 3 sections, and it's really kind of like written like a love letter, if you want to call it that, to the child. And so there's a picture that they've chosen that they want to include in the report card and what they're proud of and why they chose it. And then the first section is all student reflection. So they're reflecting, and it's a student voice. So they're reflecting on how they are, how they see themselves, adjectives, how they are in terms of their relations with their peers, how they are as a learner, what their attitudes are, and something that they're really proud of, or a memorable thing in the last term. And then the middle section is teacher reflection, and it's even called comments reflecting growth. Right, so it's all strength based, and so I am writing it like a love letter. So I'm saying, Lucas, I noticed this about you, and here's the evidence. And throughout the whole thing, it's just made to feel like I'm getting goosebumps talking about this, because it's made for the child to feel so good about themselves and all their strengths. And then the last section is the goal setting part, right? The goal setting and planning, and how we're going to support their learning and the next steps. Right. And so it's made clear to them, there's so many, like everybody's working on everything, but you pick maybe the 2 or 3 biggest things that you really want to see them grow. And throughout this, before that report card goes home, I actually call the kids up and we read the report card together. And we say, is this in line with how you see yourself? How do you feel about this? And you can imagine how much they're beaming, right? Like it's like they can't stop themselves from smiling from ear to ear. And so, that report card goes home, and, again, same thing. The feedback that we received is just amazing, right? Because parents feel so good, and you can see the children are feeling so good about themselves because it's strength-based. And, another thing is that they're part of it, right? That every day they know what they're working on. Every day they know what their strengths on, and it's put in their face. Like, okay, here are your strengths. Keep building on them, because just like I coach Bring It. So when you're learning to skate, they need to know what they're doing well, so that they keep doing it, right? And then building on what they're doing well already, so that and with that feedback, so that they know what to do next. Right? So just like they're writing, right? They need to know their strengths. And they, at first, beginning of the year, I would kind of give them their goals, because they're still learning, like say for writing, I would give them their goals, but then eventually they start to learn, when I say to them, okay, what do you want to work on next? Right. And the growth is huge, and the pride is huge. And another thing too, is that it's so important that communicating their student learning throughout. Like I was in your session on Monday, And when you were talking about sitting down and meeting the parent, and they're looking at the report card and they're questioning why, and all I can think about was, well, didn't the parents know what they were doing, like how they were doing? Like, report card shouldn't be a surprise, right? So that should be that consistent communicating student learning, so that they know where they're at, parents know where they're at, and we're working together on their development.
And Liv, as you were talking, I don't know if you were able to see Elijah's face and see his reaction or read the comments as I was popping them up there. What you're describing definitely is not the norm here in the States. And there's a lot of history behind that. And I would say it's not the norm really at any level, whether it's elementary, middle school, or high school. In the States, in most places, grades, assessment, all of those things have been manipulated into a manipulation device, a token economy, if you will. It's you do what you have to do to earn the points so that you can earn the grades. And then if there's conversation about grades, it's not necessarily always about show me some different evidence of learning. It becomes a game of debate, compromise. What can I do to get more points?
Right. You're talking about the Kleenex boxes,
it is,
right?
Yeah, it truly, it is turned into a token economy. And, I've given examples of that. And even when we're talking about some of the bigger assessments, the college admission assessments, I mean, we saw all the scandals that took place last year with the college admissions and all of those sorts of things, but it truly has turned into a game, and it's a quest for a number. Whether you're trying to get that perfect ACT score or the highest SAT score, you're trying to get a score as opposed to you're trying to learn. Even when it comes to springtime in the States, there's a lot of test prep that takes place with a lot of drill and kill, just trying to get a bunch of stuff in your short-term memory so you can regurgitate it and pass a test and get a number, and then you can forget it all. And again, there's a lot of history behind all of that, but that's how assessment has then been trickled down into classrooms, literally down to pre-K and kindergarten classrooms. It's what do I have to do to pass a test so that I can then forget it and move on to the next thing. And that's even the conversation oftentimes parents have with teachers is what can my kid do just to earn more points?
Right.
Elijah, you were going to say something. I'm sorry.
No, I think that's the reporting that you're describing is phenomenal, and I love how strength based it is. It seems that it's almost, and it's not the situation for every school, for every teacher, but it seems like it's almost opposite. That it is very like Dave said, very deficit minded, which also leads to a fixed mindset instead of that growth mindset. But I've had kids who even scored, it's like 90%, like on a math test or something like that, and they're still upset about that one question, and they're still so like, oh, so I missed one. I'm like, dude, you missed it, man. You had 9 out of 10. Like that's phenomenal. But yeah, it even trickles down to the students, and they feed off of the attitude and the mindset that we have. So focusing on that strength. Focusing on the student's strengths, I think, is just extremely powerful.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, if it's okay, can I address one of the other questions that I threw up there really quickly and just get your 2 cents on this real quick? So, Ruth, are out there. What are your thoughts on grading on a curve? I definitely have some strong opinions about this. So, grading on a curve, just to clarify, I'm assuming, Ruth, you mean the definition of you take the average, and some kids will be better than average, another one of those subjective words, and then some kids will score worse than average, a subjective term, and average being that mean or most kids are. Again, lots of subjectivity within this, and I'm kind of tipping my hand on my thoughts, but I'm curious, what are your thoughts?
Well, when I went to high school, we were marked on the curve.
Yeah.
And I found it really frustrating. And, there are always these brainiacs that would get the high grades, right? And there were only a handful to hand out. So, when I grew up, my parents had a restaurant. So I worked there Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I didn't have the same time to study and do my work and all that. And not that it's an excuse, but, it does take time. None of my other friends had any jobs, right? And it was literally right after school, Saturday and Sunday. And, anyways, so it really made me unmotivated because I knew those A's were unattainable. And, lucky if I got a B. And then I remember there was like one course, it was a marketing course that none of my other friends were in. And so I thought, oh, this is the one course that I feel like I can maybe get an A. So I worked my butt off to get that A, right? And so, you know, I see the other way around too. Like, well, what if you see yourself? It's like, you know, we talk about that narrative, right? What are students telling themselves by what they see other adults telling them? So, you know, just like when we approach it from a strength-based, strength-based, then the children see themselves like, I'm growing, I am learning, I am on, you know, like you heard me yesterday talk about the staircase analogy. It's like we're all on a different step, and that's okay. We're here to support each other. Whereas, you know, on a bell curve, I'm going to step on somebody else so that I can get to the, you know, I mean, you know, not maliciously, but right, that there is a competition, because there's only so many A's to hand out. There's only so many B's to hand out. So that's my story about bell curve.
And that you brought up a good point in that competition. Like, I think that, you know, when you do have that sort of competition that, you know, like to be the best, and, you know, that you use the term, I'm going to step on whoever. And, you know, I know that I think that does the opposite of what teachers are going for, and as far as like building relationships with kids, building a positive classroom culture and community. And so collaboration, exactly. Yes. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's a little dangerous, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just put all my cards on the table real quick, and then we can transition from this. But I'm going to throw some subjective terms out, and those of you that know me know I try to be as objective as possible when we talk assessment and grading, but I'm going to do it anyway because I think this quote serves a powerful purpose. I'm a firm believer that a bad grade is only motivation to a good student. Okay. Meaning, if you're a student who is struggling, if you're a student who you have lots of deficits, however we want to frame that, simply getting a grade that most of us would define as bad probably isn't going to motivate you to go do anything different. When we do that, when we grade on a curve, we are intrinsically saying and extrinsically saying that grades are based off of compliance and effort. Because if we're truly in a standards-based environment, when a student has mastered a standard, to then grade that on a curve and say, well, some students are bigger masters of a standard, the standard is no longer standard. The standard is arbitrary and on some sort of sliding scale. If it's standards-based, if we're saying our goal is to teach a standard, then it's standard. If that means every single kid in your class has mastered a standard, every single kid has mastered a standard. Some haven't mastered it more than others, because then it's no longer a standard. So a standard is only standard for standard. A good grade is only motivation to a bad student. So where do I stand on the curve? I love the curve in the military when we're focusing on effort and physical fitness, and people that need to go out there know how to fight and serve and go out, do all kinds of stuff that really requires a lot of effort and energy. When I'm running a race, grade me on a curve. There are going to be people that are faster than me, that have more endurance than me, more physical strength than me. Awesome. In the classroom, when we're talking about knowledge and academia and the ability to have new synapses develop in your brain, I don't think there's any place for the curve. But that's just me. Disagree, agree. It's all good. Let your wheel spin on that.
So in the States, are there a lot of teachers that mark on the curve? Like, is that a common thing?
I don't necessarily know that there's a lot of people that will admit they grade on a curve, but it is definitely a reality in a lot of places. You know, even if you are in a classroom where you have a rubric that guides your instruction, we often tend to look at, and I'll say it, I did this when I was in the classroom. So if you're a former student of mine and you follow me on social media and you're hearing this, I'm going to confess, all the stuff you thought you knew was probably accurate. Sometimes I would look at the name on the paper, and that guides the grade the kid gets. If I know that this is a kid who all the time has done amazing work and participates in class, and I know that they get it, I'm probably going to have a bias when I'm assessing that paper compared to little Johnny, who's constantly driving me nuts in class, and I see his name on the paper. It's going to lead me another way. And is that necessarily a curve? Not necessarily, but in reality, it is. It's me swaying the grade, the feedback I give based on past practice. Absolutely. And bias is what we're trying our best to avoid in this conversation. We know that growth comes from objective and actionable feedback. Objective feedback. So
if he or she is that student that's always questioning you, and you know, you go home, you're pulling your hair, it shouldn't matter.
Yeah,
right?
for sure. For sure. So we've been on this now for 30 minutes. I know I could go
Have
on
we
for,
already?
yeah, right. I know. And I
Oh,
feel like
wow.
I could go on for an hour, but
Yeah, me
I
too.
want to respect people's time and energy. And I know some of you have other meetings to go to or vacations to start planning for or whatever. Is there anything else that you want to throw out there right now, just to get people to think or to say, this is something that's really been resonating with me, or something that I need you to focus on? You know, when I do the podcast, I always call it that mic drop moment. I'm putting you on a spot right now because you haven't had a chance to prep for that yet. But do you have something in your mind that you're mudding around saying, okay, this is something I really want to talk about? Can you make sure that you bring this up in the next week or so that we can process it? It might be a question you have that you want people to think about, or just something that fits within the context of this conversation. I just dragged that out to try to give you some time to think. So hope I did a fair enough job. Anybody want to go first? Feel free.
Elijah,
Go ahead.
or I can. Okay.
Yeah, I'll let you go first.
I think it's, I'm just going to bring it back to your words. And you talked about secret sauce. You talked about magic pill and the importance of reflection. And with reflection, it takes time. It's an investment of time, right? And if I don't invest that time, I'm not going to reflect on my students. And I'm going to bring it back all the way to the beginning, when you're talking about Elijah and how he just loves kids. And, I love kids. And I dare say that my students know that I love them, and my parents know that I love them. And it's in loving them that, you want the best for them. And so to think of them as somebody like you also mentioned, like brain surgeon and the pitcher, right? Like, love your analogies. It's really getting to know them and all the pieces that make who they are, and all aspects of who they are. Because if we don't understand them and we don't love them, it's hard to really know how to push them forward, right? And that's where some of those kids, it takes longer to know, because they don't spend as much time with you. So those are the kids you have to go and purposely spend more time with. But it's understanding the whole child.
Yeah.
Right. And when you get to know them better, you get to know their interests. And so maybe it's pulling in their basketball knowledge, or their, if they love reading books, just finding different ways to reach them so that you can be more effective as a teacher, right? In terms of assessment and moving them forward. Right. If we don't understand our students, how are you going to move them forward? Right? If you don't understand where they're at in terms of their learning in all the different subject areas, how are you going to help them improve? And so that's where I feel really strongly about, is that you have to know your students. Every interaction, is intentional, and it's not just them, it's with their parents too, because apple and the tree, right? The more I get to know the parents, the more I can bring them along too. And
right.
I mentioned this yesterday. Parents we always say parents are our partners in their child's education. But I don't see enough people living that term, right?
Right.
So we need to bring them in too. I work hard, but if I don't have that support, I have to work that much harder.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a collective project, if you want to call it that. That every person is involved in this child's learning, and I'm going to try to make it the best year that and whatever time they have with me. That it's all about them, and moving them forward from wherever they're starting at. Doesn't matter where they're at. I'll take them wherever they're at, and then moving them forward. And I also think about the people that see kids as, oh, that child is too difficult, so I'm just going to push that child to the resource teacher or the another teacher. Well, you know what? They've been assigned to you. You are their teacher. So you have to figure out the best way to meet their needs, to support them, and all that. And, it brings me back to there's this child, this is years ago. My classroom was across from the hall, and every day, virtually every day, I would see him at the office. And I just thought, this poor kid, he's not with his peers, he's not learning, he's probably acted out, and how is that helping him? And anyways, so he ended up in my classroom the next year, and really, because of my heart, I just felt for him the previous year, that I we did whatever we could to keep him in the classroom and to work on his strengths and to, build him up and to include him in, not that he didn't have outbursts, but include him in the part of the solution and empowering him to, well, how are we going to fix this? And what are we going to do next time so that, you don't have to, it doesn't become that, that same repeated situation. And, I have to say, like, I think he went to the office 2 or 3 times. Right. And it's huge. It's what we do and how we see these kids makes a huge difference. It's huge.
It's the difference. Yeah. Assessment is not just sitting down and plotting kids on a standardized test. I mean, that's one way to assess, but assessment is simply a collection of evidence. It's getting to know what the kid is all about inside and outside. And I know there are some people that might be watching right now saying, okay, Liv, that's all great, but I'm going to be in this virtual world. I'm not going to have the opportunity to sit down and have conversations with kids on a day-to-day basis. I'm teaching from a computer screen. And I would actually challenge you, you got an opportunity right now that you've never had before.
Yes.
You have the opportunity to teach kids when they're at home and they can show you their pets. They can show you their stuffed animals. They can show you their favorite sports team. You can say, take me to the favorite place in your house, and they can show you their driveway, their pool, their backyard, whatever. You can have moms and dads sitting next to the kids, pets sitting next to the kids. You can learn so much about kids right now that you never had the opportunity. You can have spirit day every single day in your class. You can have hat day every day in your class right now. There is nothing stopping you right now from getting to know your kids.
And so, actually, I felt like I actually got to know my kids more.
Yeah, there you go.
When we went virtual, because of because I had a new task, like they had 4 tasks every day. And so every day I would just respond to them and it's like having little conversations and personal conversations. I had extra time to do that. In a classroom, I don't. I've got 24 kids. I have to, divide my time. Whereas here, every day I was able to give them a little note, right? How's it going? Oh, how was your weekend? And, and through their writing, I got to know them. It was.
That's good. It's good.
It's incredible.
Elijah, what you got?
So there's been something that I read in your book that I wanted to kind of talk to you about. And you use no, it's all good.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I forget. That's loud. I've got my window open. It looks like somebody's driving by. Okay, so you talk about, you use a phrase in there that using one assessment to predict the outcome of a future assessment is educational malpractice. And when I read that, it was like, what the heck?
I wrote that down too.
Because it's such a huge statement to make. And I mean, totally agree with you on that, on the statement. To me, it's just like, when I read that and started really thinking about it, I thought, okay, what does that communicate? What does that communicate to the teachers? What does that communicate to the students? And to me, the overall thing is it communicates a lack of faith in the teacher, in the teacher's ability to get that, if that child is behind, if that child did have a low score on that test, and if that's your prediction of, oh, well, they scored really low, and so they're going to score really low on the next one. What are you saying about yourself? That, the lack of faith that you have in yourself. And then what are you communicating to your students? That, hey, you scored 40%, so that's probably what you're going to score. Even though you may not tell that to them, that's the mindset that you have about your students. It becomes very fixed-minded. There's no room for growth. It's one of those, like, this is where you started, and so that's what you have, and it doesn't allow opportunity for growth, first of all. So I think it is educational malpractice, like you said, but I'm wondering, like, is there other forms of that within, because you've talked a lot, I mean, you mentioned, like, there is a form, this is a form of educational malpractice, but I'm just wondering, because you're the assessment guy right now. So I'm wondering, is there other forms of that are just as just as harmful as that form of educational malpractice? So let me give you on that.
So let me first of all tell you where the root of this came from. And if there's anybody listening to this right now down in Florida where I used to work, go earmuffs, because I'm about to drop some bombs and call some stuff out that is malpractice. So be ready. I don't work there anymore, so I got nothing to lose, and hopefully this will just change some things. So I went down to Florida a few years ago to serve as a turnaround principal at a school that was historically failing, according to the state of Florida. Schools get letter grades, just like students get letter grades.
I just learned that.
Yeah, and this was a school.
No idea.
This was a school that was rated an F. It was a school with 40% of the kids with parents that were incarcerated. 92% of the kids were on free lunch. We served 3 major housing projects. This was a school that had a lot of needs, but the needs academically failed in comparison to the needs physically, emotionally, and spiritually. There were a lot of other things we had to take care of. In this school, we were put on improvement plans. I came down there and immediately we were put on improvement plans both by the state and the district. And part of that plan was we would have people from Tallahassee, the capital, wearing suits, come over with district leadership, and we had to present our assessment plans. We had to give these assessments 3 times a year because they were using those assessments to predict our assessment at the end of the year. At no point were we looking at teacher effectiveness. At no point were we looking at classrooms to look at the instruction that took place. We were looking at data from the past to predict the future. And I understand that there's a place where we have to do that. We have to look at past practice so we can determine future needs. But when we look at the past and say the past is indicative of what the future will be, I think we missed the mark. You know, Lindsay Titus a few weeks ago on one of her conversations with Ray Hewitt and the Teach Better team dropped some major bombs, like talking about certainty and how uncertainty causes anxiety. And the only things that are certain are the past. 100% agree. And if we want to start talking about certainty, we want to talk about using statistics to drive certainty. Alex Trebek, another Canadian live, Alex Trebek from Jeopardy. You know, he was faced with a major health setback about 1.5 years ago. And he said, my goal is to beat the odds. And the odds were that he would not be alive 1 year later. Well, he is still going. If he had simply looked at that doctor's prognosis and said, nope, this is what the statistics say, he would have thrown up his hands and given up. But he said, no, I'm going to do some things in my life to beat those odds. And I'm here to say that's why we all became educators, because we wanted to be that difference maker that could change destinies. We're there because we want to make a difference. If we don't make a difference, if anybody can just be inserted and you're just a wheel in a cog or a pawn in somebody's game, step out right now and let somebody else do it. But you do it because you want to change the score. You want to change what's happening. Michael Jordan always said, when we're down, I want to go win the game because I'm going to make a difference. That's what teachers do. We look at the score and we say, yep, here I come. Bum, bum, bum. And I'm not saying we have that savior mentality, but we have that difference maker mentality. So yeah, when we look at a past score and say that's going to predict the future, sorry, then you are dismissing yourself, you're dismissing your power, and you're dismissing all that you can do. So sorry, that's my soapbox.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay. So on that note, because I could preach all day. I'm gonna leave it at that. I just want to say thank you to the two of you. I mean, it means the world that you were willing to take up 45 minutes of your day in the summer to talk data and assessment. I mean, it's bizarre to me that you guys were willing to do it, but I am so stinking grateful. If there's anybody else,
bizarre?
well, whatever.
I'll take it.
But I am appreciative. I appreciate the fact that you're doing this, that you are talking the talk. You're talking about the stuff that matters. Liv, you said, I say all the time about the secret sauce and the magic pill. We're always out there searching for this holy grail. We found it. This is it. When you understand what a kid knows and you can build off of it, you can do anything. So I appreciate you putting this forward, being willing to have this conversation. For anybody else that's watching or listening, and you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. They actually didn't talk RIT scores, mean standard deviations one time. If you want to be part of this conversation next week, just let me know. My goal is to do this for a couple weeks here, 2:00 Eastern. What is it out there right now, Liv? 11 something? 11. Elijah, what is it? Noonish there?
It's 12:44.
Okay, so I'm doing that just for the time zone thing. I don't know all that stuff. 2:00 here. If you want to join us 2:00 in real time next week, just hit me up and we'll have the conversation. So thank you guys.
Appreciate you. Thanks.
You guys are absolutely amazing.
Thank you, Olivia.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was nice meeting you, Elijah.
And nice to meet you too.